Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Not the best day in the market for Bitcoin miners or Bitcoin itself. That's okay because we've got a lot to cover on the agenda today, including upcoming miner earnings, recent news, and some analyst price target increases. A lot to talk about. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below which miner's earnings you're most looking forward to and why. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, Tuesday afternoon, an event-filled week on the agenda here. We're going to be going through some of that in today's presentation, talking about our upcoming earnings interviews, some of our anticipation for what we can expect out of the miners for this 3-month period. In addition to that, some miner news or recent developments and a few price target upgrades for you guys in store in today's video. So before we get into that, Bitcoin price itself under a little bit of pressure, retreating below 118,000, still in that range that we've been trading in over the past few weeks, but not necessarily where we had hoped to start off the week here.
No, not really. We were hoping for some more positivity in the Bitcoin price, but it did drop all the way down to 17,100 earlier. It's fought its way back up just below 18,000 now. So we'll see how it goes through the rest of the day and into tomorrow. But this shows you the resilience that Bitcoin has. It can have, a couple of blips and then it's bouncing back up there. And we like this range, 117, 119 range. It looks like it's fairly stable within that range. I saw a tweet earlier by Freedom. He was suggesting that he's expecting one small drop and then another rise. So maybe it's falling into his plan from a technical standpoint. So we'll pay more attention to what he's putting out in the next few days.
Yeah, we certainly will. And we heard from Eric Jackson yesterday that he's definitely paying attention to some of those technical triggers or technical indicators on the charts as well. Now, in terms of the miners themselves, obviously following suit here, mostly in the red. We do have one exception, TeraWulf. They've already announced that deal with Core 42. Bit Digital is neutral on the day, or at least the time this was taken. We'll talk about them in a second here. But aside from those two, Anthony, looking fairly dismal in the Bitcoin mining space today.
Yeah, I mean, that drop to 17,000, it's obviously shaken up some of the miners. We know that volatility in the miners plays a part. When Bitcoin moves, the miners move. And so, but we are seeing some sort of recovery. I think it was in a lot worse position. IREN was down over 7% at one point. Now it's recovering back, only down about 3 or 4% now. So we're seeing that pushback there, and the volumes don't seem to be, higher than what we've seen in the last few weeks. We've seen some enormous volumes of the likes of Cipher, the likes of IREN, Bit Digital for obvious reasons with all the Ethereum purchases they've been having. We know that Mara and Riot, for the last 4 or 5 years were always the biggest volumes because effectively the biggest miners. So that's where the retail investors have always gone to, the two biggest miners. But we're also seeing now other miners move into that space, and we had CleanSpark and IREN both chasing that 50 exahash. They've achieved that, and they're getting recognition now in the retail sector as well from a mine perspective. But IREN's today, they're at 23 million shares. Core Scientific at 17 million shares. Hive's volume's quite high today, 28 million shares. So maybe Hive's a bit of a play with Hive today. Remember, they've got that Paraguay site energizing literally an exahash every week at the moment. We started the year at 6, they're already at 13, and they're going to be 25 by Thanksgiving. And by my calculations, that's only 2 or 3 months away from now. So we should be getting pretty much an update on a weekly basis now as they achieve another exahash. And this will keep the retail shareholders really happy because I think Hive, they do things really well in terms of operational, but they've grown this organic way, whereas we've seen some of the other miners really utilize the ATM in a more effective way of getting that growth quicker. And if you can grow quicker, it means you can get the miners switched on and earning revenues quicker as well. So But it looks like this year has been a change for Hive. They've sort of bit the bullet. They've purchased that site from Bitfarms, who wanted to get out of Paraguay, so it worked well for both companies. And this low power cost in Paraguay will bring the blended power costs for Hive right down there. So we start seeing some really good margins. And I think I saw a tweet the other day to say that their gross mining margin now is in the 50% range there. So that's really pleasing to hear because, at the start of the year, it was probably closer to 20%. And when you've got all the operating costs to come off that figure, it doesn't leave a lot left over. So expect to see better results as we start going quarter by quarter from now on, and through 2026 we start seeing some proper green shoots when they've got that 25 exahash all energized, all working well.
Yeah, and that's why we're so excited to getting into these earnings interviews we'll come on to in a second here. Now, you mentioned the word resiliency in relation to Bitcoin price, Anthony, but also seeing that in the miners today. And Bit Digital was a great example of that. This one was down a fair amount this morning and has clawed its way back right to neutral. We're going to come on to some news from them in a second, but on that resiliency topic, I did see over the weekend an OG whale unloaded 80,000 Bitcoin, and impressive to see the price of Bitcoin holding up even in that $117,000 range, despite that massive one-time sale. So speaking of resiliency, we're starting to
Yeah.
see that on both sides.
Absolutely, and I believe it was he was using that Bitcoin to sort of diversify his portfolio. Now that suggests maybe he's got more than 80,000 Bitcoin, but that 80,000 Bitcoin cost about 52,000 when he purchased it in 2011, and now he's worth about 9 billion, having sold it through Galaxy's exchange there. So. That's an amazing storyline there. And if you think, 14 years to go from 52,000 to 9 billion, already become one of the most richest people in the world. It's a great story to have in the space, to be honest with you. And we look forward to hearing more and more of those stories. We've clung on to the pizza one for far too long. Now we've got a new story and a real story. And I just want to know if he still has a few more Bitcoin, and the 80,000 was just really the diversification. Didn't want to have all his eggs in one basket. The question really out there is, why did it take for Bitcoin price to get to 120,000 before he started to sell it? Because believe you me, if you've purchased it under $1, which suggests he has 80,000 at $52,000, that suggests his average price was under $1, probably closer to 70 cents. Why didn't he think of selling all the way up to 120, at least a little part of it, just to get some money off the table? But you've got to hand it to him. He's done a great job, and good luck to him.
Now, my theory, Anthony, and stick with me on this one, it's a little interesting the timing on this. Individuals like Adam Back, some of these OGs that are starting up these treasury companies, adding tens of thousands of Bitcoin, and also some OG is selling 80,000 Bitcoin. So I have a little theory that Adam Back may be involved with this sale, but that's nothing confirmed and just a hunch. And we'll come on to some Adam Back news in a second. But the timing, the amount of Bitcoin, the average price of each coin does seem a little bit odd, Anthony. And as you say, it's nice to switch up one of these stories away from the pizza legacy that we've talked about for so many years. So switching into the miner news, the Bit Digital story continues here. So this is a very interesting one. We've heard from Sam Tabar extensively over the last 2 years about the dissatisfaction he's had with the share price, the amount of attention, some of the trading activity on Bit Digital. He's promised to spin this out if he didn't get full recognition for these components. Now he's done exactly that. They're taking the next step. They've now filed for the initial IPO. We've got some pricing details you can go through, and the official ticker, which is a nice little play on Wi-Fi, or one of the internet acronyms.
Yes, so they've announced today the launch of the IPO, which effectively 7.8 million shares. And the expected price range is between $15 and $17 per share. The company itself supplied on the Nasdaq, and you quite rightly suggest there is the ticker symbol is going to be Wi-Fi. That's WYFI, and it may grant underwriters a 30-day option to actually purchase another. I believe it's just over 1.1 million shares. Additional to what's been stated there as well. So the offering will proceed now to the SEC. and following approval will be made exclusively through the normal channel, which is through a prospectus. So looking forward to getting more details on that as it comes through.
Yeah, you definitely bet about that one, Anthony. Looking very forward to the discussion with Sam Tabar as soon as he's able to return to the podcast here and answer all of those questions that you guys have provided. Now, the next one we have Mara Holdings. They're actually going to be coming on the podcast to talk about Q2 earnings tomorrow. Salman Khan, the CFO. We haven't had Mara on the channel for quite some time, so looking very forward to getting an update here. Specifically in light of this $950 million convertible that we've been covering throughout the past week here.
Yeah, and thanks to those people who put a few questions in the comments. We're going to hopefully try and get a few of those questions asked during that podcast there. A lot of ground to cover. Hopefully we'll make good use of the time we have with Salman. It's great to have him on the show. And as the CFO, a timely one as well, because as you say, earnings come out after market close tonight, so at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And so we'll be ready for the podcast, which goes out on Thursday. So in a nice timely way there. But this update today is about the 950 million convertible note at 0%. And now the company do have an option to purchase an additional 200 million aggregate principal amount within the 13-day period. So we might get a further update to say they took that option there to sell a further 200 million. And the proceeds from the 950 are going to be around about 940.5 million. So 9.5 million will be the initial purchase discounts and commissions. Now, Mara are going to use 18.3 million of that, of the proceeds to repurchase approximately 19.4 million of its 1% convertible senior notes that are due in 2026. And they've already indicated they're going to spend an additional $37 million to pay for the cost of the cap call, the transaction. So that'll de-risk any downside in the share price. So it looks like they're following, the same process that we've seen a number of other miners do there. This is Mara's third convertible note. Now, they have said that they're going to use the funds to cover those two processes I've just mentioned there, but also to buy Bitcoin and to cover general corporate purposes, which may include any acquisitions, expansion of assets. Remember, Mara Holdings have said they're going to go to 75 exahash this year. They're currently around about 57, 58 exahash. So a significant amount of more machines to probably purchase. We do know they've invested heavily in Auradine, so hopefully we'll get a flavour of what's happening with regards to that investment. Talked extensively about Bitdeer. Auradine are doing something very, very similar in terms of bringing new, more efficient miners to the market. And it'd be interesting to see how Mara's investment, which was quite significant over the last couple of years, has turned out for that company. But we'll get more of, hopefully, on that story from Salman during the podcast, which goes out on Thursday.
Yeah, we definitely will. And speaking of making purchases or trying to add additional exahash, there may be actually some mining fleets coming up for sale as well. If you think about Bit Digital, the potential of spinning out their mining division and or Core Scientific. So potentially Mara is looking to cash up and take advantage of one of those opportunities, buying a whole facility rather than maybe scaling one. Now, we talk about upcoming earnings. We have Jason Less from Riot the following week, Craig Tavares from Buzz HPC. That's the subsidiary of Hive Digital. So their HPC AI division going to be doing a special on that one. And of course, not to forget about our Wall Street contenders on the channel. Kevin Dede scheduled to come on next week as well, following that big presentation by Eric Jackson this week. So looking very forward to that. Now, speaking of Wall Street, a couple of price target upgrades in the sector as well, both by JP Morgan, both increases, both on 50 exahash miners here. So interesting to see Wall Street really waking up to this story. We've talked about the fact that retail, in many cases, a lot more agile than some of these hedge funds, maybe beat them to the punch in terms of the HPC AI component of this sector, but nice to see starting to get a little bit of recognition from these big investment banks.
Yeah, I mean, we see the investment banks put out their updates on a regular basis. This one's quite interesting from JP Morgan because when the update came out, the share price was already over $18 a share, so already higher than their new target, which has been raised from 12 to 16. So I don't know how much that price target takes into account any potential client being named in this next quarter with regards to HPC, because Dan has indicated by the end of the year he should be able to announce who's going to be moving into Horizon One. And potentially things could move from there because once you've named a partner, as we saw with Core Scientific last year, and with the likes of TeraWulf as well, the market really likes that predictability of the HPC business model compared to the unpredictability of the Bitcoin mining model.
Yeah, they certainly do. Now, the second price target increase, again, JP Morgan was CleanSpark. So the other 50 exahash contender here, we've talked about them really battling it out for that top tier position. Still receiving an analyst upgrade, but in this case, going up $1 from 14 to 15.
Yeah, and again, it's early days. We need to see the earnings coming out now to see, how these companies are doing, irrespective of the FASB rules, because we know that those with hodls are going to have some nice green positions. But if you remove that figure, let's see how they've been performing as a mining company. Have they managed to cover all their other costs? The energy costs, the staffing costs, depreciation costs, all the salary and stock compensation costs. So we'll be having a close look at all these companies from that perspective there. If we just take away the FASB upgrade, because we know that for some of these miners, it's going to be significant. And for the likes of for Mara Holdings, we could see well over $1 billion being announced as their net income when they announce after hours tonight. Bear in mind, the reverse can happen in a downside with Bitcoin, and we saw that in Q1. And the earnings for Mara will win the hundreds of millions as a net loss because of the FASB rules. So this is an interesting position to be in there. I mean, how much is it an issue for companies that are using that new ruling there as we go forward with a volatile Bitcoin price? We could see sort of like a roller coaster effect of, one quarter was showing profit, the following quarter was showing a loss. Unless the Bitcoin price continues to rally in the same direction, we're going to see these changes in quarterly earnings because of the fact that they can revalue their Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
Yeah, we certainly are. And we're going to talk about some of the requirements to get into these indices as well. But you're right, Anthony, this volatility really presents a challenge for some of these large Treasury-esque companies, as this is something you really don't see in any other industry. So significant impacts on their earnings or results quarter by quarter. Now, you talk about some of the underlying fundamentals for the business, the mining itself without the hodl into the equation. If we look at Hashrate index here from Luxor, you can see hash price itself getting back up close to $60, a breath of fresh air for the miners. We did receive a difficulty increase in the last cycle here. However, it was quite small compared to what we've seen in the past. And the other thing we wanted to talk about is just the network itself, seeing tremendous growth here as both Bitcoin and hash price start to increase.
Yeah, absolutely. And that hash price getting close to 60 is going to be, positive news for the miners. Remember, after the halving, it dropped very quickly, and we saw it go all the way down to lower than $40 per petahash per day. And so, getting close to 60 gives that like a 50% boost. And that's the effects of the Bitcoin price since the halving there. Since the election, we've seen that Bitcoin price really rally. That gives a little bit of respite. But, we've talked before about how the difficulty also impacts these miners in taking away effectively production from their hash rate, because we see more and more machines going onto the global hash rate. The difficulty adjustment then is increases, and that means it makes it harder for every miner to get those rewards that they got the previous 2 weeks. And we're seeing now that the time taken, the average time taken for each block is over 10 minutes. In terms of the global hash rate, again, it's in that sort of 900 to 1,000 band there. But if we look at the sort of the 12-month chart, you can see for the first sort of 6 or 7 months, the actual slope increase in global hash rate looks to have sort of like started to flatten out a little bit. And this might be, down to the fact that we're seeing a number of these public miners moving their power allocation towards HPC and not really growing any more hash rate. So we've seen a massive increase in hash rate from a number of the big miners over the last sort of 12, 18 months. The likes of IREN, CleanSpark, Riot, Mara, also Bitfarms, Hive this year as well. But we're not going to see that level of increase going into 2026. We've seen CleanSpark put out a target of about 60 exahash for the remainder of this year, and Mara have increased theirs to 75, and we know Hive's going to 25. But other than those three updates there's not a lot of growth anywhere else on the table to see. And so this might well be the global hash rate, sort of petering it off a little bit. It's had some massive growth over the last 2 or 3 years, as we've seen these companies grow from low single digits all the way up to 30, 40, 50, 60 exahash in no time whatsoever. But now we're starting to see, a change in the guard in terms of strategy. More and more miners utilizing that power towards HPC and more wanting to utilize it there. And we'll get Salman's view when we interview him as to why Mara have decided to stay as a pure play miner and why didn't they sort of like look at maybe utilizing some of their power towards HPC like the vast majority of other miners are doing.
Yeah, it's a good question. And really, one of the reasons earlier in the podcast, we said we expected the Bitcoin price to be higher. We just talked about hash price. We've talked about this growing Bitcoin price. Is some of the positive momentum or news that we're seeing on the macro scale here. So if we take a step back from Bitcoin mining for a second, the White House itself, the Trump administration, they are now committed to delivering the very first Bitcoin report or Bitcoin National Strategic Stockpile report tomorrow on the 30th of July. So we haven't talked about the strategic Bitcoin reserve in quite some time on the channel. This is a story we covered closely at the start of the year, but it's anticipated this may be the next step in basically starting that action or purchase plan, which you would think would have a bigger impact maybe on the price of Bitcoin. Now, the other component on a macro scale we need to keep an eye on this week are interest rates. Coincidentally, they are scheduled to be updated tomorrow as well. So hopefully you guys got a chance to see that interaction between Jerome Powell and Trump at the Federal Reserve there. Quite comical, but two major events this week for Bitcoin and the economy in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's more and more positivity, more and more looking towards increasing the adoption. And we can honestly say that this last 12 months, going back to when we were at sort of Nashville last year, when the president gave his speech on Bitcoin and talked, about the future of Bitcoin and how positive he wanted to make America as, the effectively the leader in this latest asset class. And it's all going just as he said he would do. So, hats off to the president. He's done exactly what he said he would do, and we'll see more and more of these decisions coming to fruition over these next few months to support what he's been trying to do since he came into the office.
Yeah, at least on the crypto or Bitcoin side of things, definitely seems to be progressing along quite quickly here. Now, we have a tweet out from B21M talking about some of these big catalysts or dates. We just discussed the digital asset report coming out tomorrow, along with interest rates. On the 31st, Strategy is coming out with earnings. So you talk about the impact of FASB or HODL. No company in the world will have a bigger impact than Strategy. That should definitely turn some heads, and I think get a lot of people really reconsidering the Bitcoin space once they start to see some of these eye-popping numbers. Now, the other interesting date coming up, the S&P quarterly ranking on August 15th. We talked about the fact that these big FASB adjustments have an impact on earnings. Interestingly enough, Strategy now eligible for the S&P 500 inclusion based on the fact that they've had 4 consecutive or cumulative quarters of profitability in light of this big adjustment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to the strategy earnings reports, which, like you say, comes out on July 31st. Bear in mind the size of their hodl and the increase in valuation from the end of Q1 2025 to the end of Q2. So the change in value of Bitcoin from the 31st of March to 30th of June at around about $24,000 a coin, and they've got over 600,000. That suggests somewhere in the region of about 14 billion in positive FASB adjustments to their accounts. So that'll go through the income statement, showing a nice green position there. It's obviously all non-cash. They don't sell any of the Bitcoin, so there's no cash related to that there. But it does make the earnings look extremely well, given that the price of Bitcoin has increased. And to maintain that, they need the Bitcoin price to further increase by a similar amount in the next quarter. And we just the trouble we don't know is it's the unpredictability. Who knows where it's going to be at the end of September, but we do expect to see some really, really strong results. And that will be highlighted when Mara release theirs tonight. We should see, if we see that sort of 1 billion mark in terms of their net income position, you can start seeing the rest of the position for a lot of these companies with large hodls as they start delivering their earnings over the next few weeks.
You're exactly right. And you have to think about the narrative. You and I talk about Bitcoin miners every single day. Probably most of the people watching this do too. We understand the narrative here, the impact or the estimated impact of these adjustments. But for regular people not involved in this sector, you're exactly right, Anthony. Once they start seeing earnings per share for Marathon, for Strategy, they're going to start going down this list that we're going to bring up on the screen next and say, okay, who else is in the top 10 in terms of Bitcoin treasury companies? Oh, well, Riot is, CleanSpark is, Hut 8 is. Maybe we should start looking at these companies. And I think it's part of that re-rate process we've talked about. So speaking of that top table of Bitcoin treasury companies, this one was interesting too. Michael Saylor put out one of these cryptic tweets on Sunday talking about the start of his Bitcoin journey with the $250 million investment. However, it was not followed by a purchase, so a little bit different or a deviation from the strategy we've seen. Now, that being said, strategy still comfortably in first position on the top 100. You can see just north of 607,000 Bitcoin. And interestingly enough, a lot of new names in the top 10 here, Anthony, which we've actually had the pleasure of meeting or talking to the majority of.
Yeah, I mean, Strategy literally have two-thirds of all the Bitcoin in the top 100 there. So that's going to be take some doing to actually catch them there. But yes, when you look down that top 10, it's interesting. You have to go down to the 10th company before you find one that we haven't actually physically met at conferences or at various locations where we've been invited to. So we've met, pretty much everybody on that list apart from Elon Musk in the top 10. Maybe we drop him a note, see if we can fulfill the whole of the top 10. But if you go down below Tesla, we've met the likes of Hut 8, Block, and certainly other companies in that sort of top 20 or 30 there. But this table is growing on a daily basis, and new companies are added. I mean, I've highlighted it before. You go back 6 months ago, and there was literally only 70 companies, and to get onto that list of 70, you had to have 3 Bitcoin. Now it's at 100, and on this particular table, which slightly differs from HODL 15's table, you have to have 29 Bitcoin to get on there. I think on HODL 15, I think that figure's now over 40 Bitcoin to get in the top 100. So it is changing in a rapidly changing dynamic for these treasury companies. More and more seem to be coming up, as I say, on a daily basis. More and more companies are also looking at adopting. Look at what the ETFs have done in the space of 18 months. BlackRock holds more Bitcoin currently than Strategy. They have over 700,000, and many of the other ETFs have got significant amounts on their treasury positions as well. So it's been a real good 18 months in terms of we've seen these companies grow Bitcoin, we've seen the ETFs grow, we've seen the Bitcoin price go from 42,500 at the start of 2024 all the way up to 123,000, which is the all-time high. And today, yes, it's having a bit of an off day in the 117,000, but literally only a few percentage points away from all-time high. So I wouldn't get too worked up about the price at the moment. Got to stay in for the long term and watch the price move accordingly over a longer period.
Yeah, you certainly do. And I'm a fairly modest guy about our channel and platform, but it is pretty cool to have physically met 9 out of the 10 top Bitcoin treasury CEOs in the world. And you start to think about the future potential of Bitcoin out 50, 100, 150 years. To say we were here right at the start in that first 20-year period, interviewing these people and having them on the channel is really quite something. So great to see the momentum building. And the other thing I wanted to mention, we are actually expanding our reach here and starting to look at the Ethereum treasury companies, the HPC, the AI plays. So we've got the top 10 strategic Ethereum hodls here as well. And actually have 3 of these companies slated to come on for interviews or earnings interviews in the next few weeks as well, with BTCS, Bit Digital, of course, and IntChains Group or ICG, which is another one that frequents the channel. So pretty cool to see the platform growing. Awesome to see the space, the interest in crypto and Bitcoin in general growing. And as you say, Anthony, always nice to take a step back, especially on these red days, and just remind ourselves of what we're a part of here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this table, obviously, it's a new table, but you can already see that top four. We talked about a race, and they're certainly using that analogy, and they're growing Ethereum treasury positions at a significant rate of knots. In fact, Bitmine already have $2.3 billion of Ethereum on their treasury. And bear in mind, when you look at Mara Holdings, who've been growing their Bitcoin for the last 5 or 6 years, have 50,000, which is probably worth about 6 billion. You have Bitmine here who've been growing it in a far shorter period, but already getting up to well over a third of that target compared to where Mara are with their Bitcoin hodl.
Yeah, just seeing tremendous acceleration in the amount of money that's being raised, deployed in this space. Where does it end? You and I don't necessarily know, but it does seem that there's a lot of players coming into both of these treasury type of sectors. So we'll save that one for another day. Let us know in the comment section below if you have any questions for the team at Mara, Riot, or any of the other interviews we have coming up in the next few weeks. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.